Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show. Shane Kohler here. It's a pleasure to be on with you today. And I'm doing things a little bit different today. So normally I live stream the episode, but I'm not live streaming today. I'm just sitting in my office. And I was going to try to do my normal thing yesterday, but we were having our floors done upstairs. And so, of course, there's banging and sawing and cutting and all that kind of stuff going on. And I set up a little table outside. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to record the episode outside. And I get out there. First of all, it's sweltering hot. And then I start doing some test recordings and things like that. And no matter what I did, there was still banging and sawing and cutting and everything else. Like there was no getting away from it. So last minute, I had to kind of cancel the episode. But I did want to make sure to show up today because I know there are quite a few of you that are my faithful listeners that tune into the show every week, and you look forward to this when it comes out. And so I wanted to make sure to show up for you. And so if that's you, I just want to say thank you for being you. Thank you for being one of those faithful listeners. And I'm happy to be here and show up and just do a little impromptu episode and make sure that I have something ready for you when you're looking for it. So thank you again. And in today's episode, I wanted to talk about creating a conscious relationship, or rather, what even is a conscious relationship. And I think it's kind of appropriate that this is the episode I'm doing today, because today is actually Fatima and I's 4-year wedding anniversary. This October, it'll be 8 years that we've been together in total, but today is actually our 4-year wedding anniversary, July 10th. And just to give you a quick backstory for those of you who may not be aware of it. So if you look 4 years ago, is the middle of 2020. And our original wedding date was April 17th, 2020. Of course, the pandemic ended up hitting the U.S. Right around March, and we were still planning, like, we're going to go forward with it. We're going to do it. And we had our wedding planned to be in Aruba, which is actually where we got engaged. I proposed to her in Aruba, and we were actually going to get married in the exact same spot that I proposed. And long story short is Aruba ended up completely closing their borders. They said nobody in or out. We're completely shutting down the country. We had to ultimately cancel the wedding with only about 2 weeks notice. And, we had kind of said to the guests, whoever wants to come can come. If you don't want to come, we understand. We ended up sending out an email and saying, I'm sorry, there is no wedding now. And there was a period of time between April and July when we didn't know when we were going to get married. We didn't know, we didn't know anything. Nobody knew anything back then, right? It was a weird time to be alive. So anyway, I had a friend who was leading a retreat in Montana, and Montana at the time was actually completely open. The pandemic hadn't really gotten to Montana. It had been winter, and they were just transitioning into summer, and the whole state had kind of been dead. And he was leading a little retreat out there, and so we went with a small group of friends on this retreat, and we ended up getting married the last day of the retreat. My friend who was leading the retreat was actually the person who was supposed to marry us in Aruba. And so we said, hey, let's go on the retreat. And on the last day of the retreat, we'll get married and you can do the wedding. And we ended up having a really beautiful ceremony with a small group of friends on this gorgeous lake in Glacier National Park in Montana. We were able to book out this little room in a hotel, like a little dining room in a hotel that the hotel was actually closed, but the dining room, they let us rent it. And it was maybe 8-10 friends of ours. Some of them were on the retreat. Some of them flew out just for the wedding. And we got married in this little hidden neck of the world when the rest of the world was shut down. And it was a really beautiful, magical thing. It was like a miracle just to be able to do that and have our wedding, even though it had gotten canceled. And even though, our family wasn't able to be there, a lot of our friends weren't able to be there, but we were able to commemorate this with some of the closest people to us. And it was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony, and really what a gift. And so that's how our relationship started, or our marriage started, rather. And so I think today, speaking into what is a conscious relationship, it's a great day to reflect on all of this and reflect on our journey. And the idea of having a conscious relationship is something that Fatima and I were talking about before we even really knew the term conscious relationship. This was really before, we were doing relationship coaching. And when we started dating, I just think based on our own experience and everything we had been through, and, we were both kind of seeking the same thing. And all the people that we had met prior to each other, it seemed that they didn't really want that same thing, or that they weren't really capable of having it. And when we started dating, and we were, some of you may know our story, we were long distance for 3 years before we ultimately ended up moving in together, which funny enough was during the pandemic, right? So, or not during the pandemic, but immediately before the pandemic. So we were long distance for 3 years, had our own houses in separate states. We had to take a plane to see each other. And then I ended up moving to New Jersey. I moved into her townhouse. It was like 1,500 square feet. And then a couple of months after I moved in, the country shut down, and we went from long distance on opposite ends of the country to then living in the same 1,500 square feet and being in lockdown. So talk about going from one extreme to the other. And you can imagine, as two people who really value our space and had been used to having a lot of it, then having, being in confined space with each other, that was a learning opportunity for both of us. There was a lot of growth that happened there. But even from the beginning of our relationship, we this idea of having a conscious relationship, and the way I'm going to define that today is an intentionally created relationship, right? A lot of people, a lot of us, and even myself and probably my wife in the past have we've kind of fallen into relationships without a lot of consciousness or awareness or intention, not really creating something, but being driven by a lot of unconscious feelings and unconscious desires and kind of desperate sense for fulfillment or happiness or love. And a lot of times, many people, most people probably rush into relationships from this place, right? From this kind of desperate place, needing love, needing fulfillment, needing happiness, feeling kind of empty inside and thinking that somebody's going to be the solution to that. And when Fatima and I started dating, we started talking about the fact that we wanted to intentionally create a relationship, that we didn't want it to be something that we rushed into based on all these feelings. And we had a lot of feelings. And my wife, I give her a lot of credit for being the one to kind of stand her ground and say, like, yeah, we're feeling all of this stuff, but let's not get carried away with ourselves, right? Like, let's really, if we're going to do this, let's have this be something real. Let's have this be something intentional. Let's talk about what we want it to be and how we want it to be. And from the beginning, let's create it to be that. And an agreement we made very early on, I mean, I'd say within the first couple of weeks of us talking, is we agreed that our relationship was always going to be about love. And what we meant by that when we said that, or how we defined that with each other, was that we were always going to want the highest good for ourselves and each other. And that the relationship was never going to be something that took away from that. Right. And so there were a lot of unknowns. Like I said, we lived on opposite ends of the country, and there was a lot that, we didn't know where this was going or how it was going to work. And, we both had lives and schedules and all this stuff. And we made an agreement early on that if this relationship was going to work, it was going to work because it was the highest good for both of us. And that we were always going to prioritize love. And what love looks like sometimes is that if this relationship is becoming an interruption to either of our highest good, then the most loving thing to do is to let it go. And so we established very early on in our relationship that this wasn't about us using each other for our own happiness. This wasn't about getting what we wanted from each other, but that this relationship was going to be about a mutual interest in growth and the highest good for each of us. And so when I talk about a conscious relationship, that's really how I'm defining it, is a relationship that is intentionally created, a relationship that has love and growth and the highest good of the individuals at the heart of it, rather than us rushing in and just trying to get what we want from the relationship. And I think that's such a common thing in our world is, we're all looking for love. And when we meet someone that we think we can get it from, we kind of put all considerations to the side and just try to keep this person, or just try to get this person to like us, or just try to get this person to be who we want them to be. And, as much as we might say we're seeking love, that approach is actually very unloving. It's actually very dishonoring to the individuals in the relationship. And so that's something that, again, I give my wife a lot of credit for. She's a little bit older than me, and she had been around the block a couple more times than I had. And I was aware of it to a degree, but I give her a lot of credit in really presencing that in our relationship and saying that that's how she wanted it to be. And I agreed with it. I said, yeah, like I want it to be that way too. And that's how it was. And to a large degree, that's how it's always been for us. It's interesting, this idea of creating a conscious relationship, because the more and more I go into my work and the more I try to define what it is I actually do, which is not always easy. But when the more and more I think about what it is I actually do, I think my work is really about helping people create and sustain conscious relationships. The Inspired Love program used to be, when it started, it was a program for people who wanted to find a relationship, right? And it was obviously with the intention of having a conscious, healthy, sustainable relationship. But it was a program for singles who wanted to find a relationship. And then what happened was, so many of the people in the program ended up being in healthy, conscious relationships. And then the conversation started shifting to, okay, well, now I'm in one. What do I do? People were saying, I've never been in a relationship like this before. I don't know what to do with it. And so the conversation started to evolve, and now it's a good mix of people who are seeking love and people who are in love, and people who are navigating the first year, or people who are getting beyond that first year. And we're starting to have this unfolding conversation that's holistically about conscious love from all angles, from all aspects, right? In every stage of it. And what it's becoming is this really beautiful, supportive community of people who are working together to create and sustain conscious love. And what I want to talk about today is that process of creating and then sustaining conscious love. One other quick thing I want to say before we move on is there's another announcement I wanted to make about the Inspired Love program, is that we just welcomed our first man into the group. And it's largely been a program for women. That's where my wife and I started when we started our brand. And then as it's evolved, we decided, okay, we don't want this to just be something for women. We want this to be a place where men and women can work together around understanding each other, around creating conscious love. And really, we want to evolve the conversation here. So, I'm seeing a lot of really beautiful things happen in this program, and it's really becoming more about healing and growth, which is what a conscious relationship is about. And so I want to actually start there, that a conscious relationship is about healing and growth. It's not about just making ourselves happy. And that being said, I want to also presence that I think having a conscious relationship, or being in a conscious relationship, is one of the best things you can do if you want to be happy in life, right? I think that being in a conscious relationship is, in terms of having a holistically fulfilled life, I think it's one of those things that so many of us want, that so many of us crave, and it is an I don't want to say it's essential, because there are people who may not want that. But I think for so many of us, it is one of the essential puzzle pieces of having a completely fulfilled life. And so while creating a conscious relationship is one of the core elements of being truly happy in life for so many people, it's not about being happy. And that's a subtle distinction, but it's a big one. And I think it's one that a lot of people miss, because most of us are looking for a relationship to make us happy. We're looking for that special someone who are going to come into our lives. And once they come into our lives, everything's going to be better. And so many of us are living in a way where our life is almost on hold, waiting for that person to get there. And it's like, when I meet this person, then I can finally start living my life. And that is actually the opposite of a conscious relationship. And when we start with talking about how do we create one, you cannot create one like that. If your life is on hold, waiting for something or someone to happen so you can really start living the way you want to, you're not going to attract a conscious relationship. You're not even going to attract someone who has the potential to have a conscious relationship, because that mindset is a deprivation mindset. And so you're going to attract someone who is going to reflect that deprivation. And so many of us who feel like we're stuck in never-ending cycles of unfulfillment in our love lives, or stuck in, consistent situations that are disappointing and let us down, I would say that's like the first place to look, right? Are you operating from a place of deprivation around it, right? Are you operating from a place of emptiness, hoping that the relationship is going to fill you? Because all you're really going to attract from that place are relationships that increase that sense of emptiness. You may have some rushes of excitement and euphoric experiences along the way, but ultimately in the long term, every relationship is going to fall flat. And when I talk about earlier, I said that my wife and I said that we wanted this conscious relationship that we were building to be based in love, right? And we wanted it to be something that was always supporting our highest good as individuals rather than something that diminished our highest good as individuals. And one of the things that I think was so important about that is when we met, both of us had done an incredible amount of work around creating a deeply fulfilling life for ourselves as individuals. We had purpose, we had meaning, we had friendships, we had activities and hobbies, and we had spiritual communities, and we had in our respective lives, we had created so much for ourselves that we loved. And one of the things that was really present in the early days of our relationship is that we didn't want the relationship to be something that took away from all these things in our life that we loved, right? We didn't want the relationship to be something that was an interruption to that. I've often shared the story that my wife and I almost broke up about 15 times in our first year together. And a lot of people, when you're going through that in your first year, and it's challenging and you're, working through some stuff, like so many of us assume that this is the wrong relationship. If it was the right person, if it was the right relationship, then it wouldn't be happening like this. And that's just simply not true. Actually, many times if you're confronting some challenging things with the person, that's a great sign that that is the right relationship, but it all depends on how you're able to work through them. And something my wife often told me, especially in the early days, but she continues to say it now, is that one of the things that gives her faith in our relationship is our ability to work through challenges together. And so, yes, we've had our share of fights. We've had our share of disconnections. We've had our share of, going to bed angry and waking up angry and, feeling misunderstood and feeling like we're not having our needs met and all this stuff. But what this always results in with us is a place where we come together and we really hear each other and we really learn from each other and we really authentically communicate about it. And we find out how we can be better for the relationship, for each other, and for ourselves. And so when I say that the relationship isn't necessarily about making you happy, there have been many times in our relationship where we have made each other incredibly happy, and there have been many times in our relationship where we have not made each other happy. But I think what it is about healing and growth. It's about becoming better people, right? When we sit down, when we communicate, when we hear each other, when we learn, when we figure out how we can be better for ourselves and we can be better for each other and we can be better for the relationship. That is a process of mutual evolution that's taking place. Right? There's an evolution that's happening for her while she's in relationship with me, and there's an evolution that's happening for me while I'm in relationship with her. That's something that could not happen if we weren't together, right? If we were both alone in our lives, we could not grow in that way. We could not challenge each other into that growth. And I think there is something so beautiful that happens when your life is no longer just about you. When your life is no longer just about you and it becomes about including someone else in that. And I often share the example, if I want to take a trip to Bali, like I could do that. And I mean, my wife would probably go with me if I did, but say I wanted to go by myself. Like we don't have a relationship where it's like, no, you can't go on a trip by yourself. Like we often go on trips by ourselves, but it wouldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to Bali next week. See you later. No, it would be like we sit down, we talk about it, we discuss it, we make a plan, we figure out, the things that I'm responsible for. How are those going to be covered while I'm gone? How are we going to stay connected and on and on and on, right? All these different things. And that is what it's like to share your life with someone, right? That it's no longer just about me, that in all my decisions, in every aspect of my life, I am being considerate of another human being. and their needs and their desires. And I am making accommodations for that. And I'm doing that while still honoring myself, right? So I've got to find a way to accommodate for her needs and her desires, and vice versa. She does the same for me. And we've got to do this while also making sure that we are fully taken care of. And this is not easy. I mean, this is the reason that people self-abandon in relationships, right? Because it's easier to self-abandon, right? If I just give up myself and I just focus on you, well, that resolves a lot of potential conflict in the relationship. It also causes one of the people to die inside, but it resolves a lot of the things that would potentially be conflicting. And in that first year, when my wife and I almost broke up 50 times, I said 50 times, what I meant was 15 times, but felt like 50 times. But, when we were going through all those challenging situations, when our relationship was on the verge of ending, what we were doing was exactly that. We were challenging the relationship, and to a degree, we were challenging each other to say, can we find a way to meet our needs and each other's? Can this relationship be something that supports both of us as a couple and also supports both of us as individuals? And I think it's important to say that, please understand when I say this, that I'm not saying that we've always done this perfectly. I'm not saying that this has been easy by any means, but I'm saying this is a goal that we are always working towards. This is an ongoing discussion in our partnership in each phase of our lives that we are engaging with, right? That we are exploring together. And this constant conversation that we're in around how to have it all, so to speak, right? How to be completely fulfilled as individuals, how to be fulfilled in our relationship, how to have a wonderful home, how to have a wonderful life together, how to have the family that we're working on right now, right? Like this constant dream that we're building and collaborating on this dream is not only about getting what we want from life. And yes, that's kind of the carrot that we're chasing, so to speak, right? Is this dream, and we're moving towards it and we're getting what we want. But it's the process of going through this together that makes our relationship conscious. It's the honoring of each other and our relationship in every step of the process that makes this relationship conscious. A lot of people, and no judgment. I mean, I've been there I've been there in my own way in many instances. But a lot of people, they get into a relationship, and then it's like, okay, well, what's the next step? Let's get married. And then what's the next step? Let's have kids. And then what's the next step? And then they're always kind of chasing that next goal without an honoring of each other as it's happening. And I think that's where a lot of people end up very disillusioned in their relationships 10, 15 years in, when they've been moving towards the next goal and they're always caught up in the next exciting thing. Let's get engaged. Let's get married. Let's have kids. Let's, all of this. But their relationship dies in the process because they weren't nurturing the relationship along the way, right? What was happening underneath all this goal chasing was there was resentment building. There was disconnection building. There were needs that were not getting met of the individuals, and that wasn't discussed because it's uncomfortable to discuss, and it's challenging to discuss, and it's scary to discuss, and nobody wants to be vulnerable enough to discuss it, and nobody wants to have those kinds of, intimate interactions and face that potential rejection or face that potential being made a fool of, or, however you want to refer to it. And so because we're avoiding those kinds of deeper things that are happening under the surface in our relationships, we tend to just press forward and pursue that next goal, that next benchmark in the relationship, while operating over the hearts and souls of our partner and ourselves. And that's an unconscious relationship. And a lot of times we do that when we're dating, right? As when we're dating, we're not really, as I shared with my wife, we established very early on that the goal of the relationship was going to be love. And that love means that we're committed to each other's highest good, that we're not committed to getting what we want from each other. And so if the goal of our relationship is love, and that's what we're committed to here, then if this relationship doesn't serve that, we have to be willing to let the relationship go. And what I see so many people do when they're dating is they find someone they like and there's an electric connection and they feel a lot for the person and they get attached to the person, and then it becomes about keeping the person. There's no awareness about, well, is this really in my highest good? Is this really in the other person's highest good? We're not stopping to ask those questions and really explore those more challenging or scarier or difficult issues. We're not stopping to say, hey, something feels out of alignment for me here. Before I move forward in this relationship, we need to talk about it, right? And seeing if we can find that common ground, and doing that with the complete open-heartedness that if we can't find this common ground, that's okay. I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to hate you. I'm not going to, talk bad about you. I'm not going to say you're an asshole or a jerk or whatever and, talk to all my friends about, how horrible you are. No, I'm just going to accept that, hey, we had an amazing connection, but at the end of the day, this relationship was not serving our highest good. And so we made a mutual decision to let it go. So many of us do not want to engage in relationships that way. And I think the reason is because we want to find it and get on with it yesterday, right? When we meet someone we like, we don't want to deal with the potential reality that as much as we like them, they're not for us. As much as we like them and as much as they may like us, maybe there's a better partner for both of us. And if there is a better partner for both of us, we want the other person to go find that better partner, right? I don't want to keep you for myself if your highest good would be with someone else. And this was an actual conversation that I had with my wife and she had with me within the first couple weeks of dating, right? In the first couple of weeks, people are usually clinging to each other. And I remember my wife and I saying this. We said, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. This is what it's supposed to feel like. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. There's no demanding. There's no guilting. There's no, like I said, pressure or expectation to feel that if you don't want to be here, that you're somehow going to be wrong for not wanting to be here. This is a free space for both of us to explore this potential. This is a free space for both of us to explore what we might have here or not have here. And if we're ready to take the next step, we'll take the next step. If we're not ready to take the next step, we won't. And I would say, I proposed to my wife in 2018, at the end of 2018. So we had been together for about 2 years. We got together in October 2016, and then I proposed in December 2018 on her birthday. And I would say up until maybe about October of that year, so that was about 2 years in, that's really how we operated in our relationship. And again, we were long distance. If we hadn't been long distance, maybe we would have gotten there a little bit sooner, right? We were long distance for 3 full years. So maybe we would have gotten there a little bit sooner if we hadn't been long distance. But this was how we operated. It was a free space to get to know each other. And that is so vulnerable. It is so vulnerable to fall in love with someone and to give them permission to go. And honestly, I've said this many times on the podcast, we still give each other that permission. I think since I proposed and we agreed to get married and we got married and we've moved forward, we're 4 years from our wedding now. Since then, I think the idea of one of us leaving is kind of a non-issue anymore because our commitment is so solidified. But even to this day, we have said many times, if this is not what you want, you're welcome to leave. Because the fact is, and I say this to my single clients, and it's true from myself and my wife today, is that I don't want someone who doesn't want me. I don't want to hold someone here out of some commitment they made years ago that they're not still feeling in their heart, right? If we're going to be here, if we're going to be doing this, I want to know that you're 100% in it, and I want to be 100% in it. And if we can't be 100% in it, then we've got some serious things to look at. And that doesn't mean, if I wake up one day and I'm not feeling 100% in it, that I'm going to walk out the door. But that means there's something way off in what we're doing right now. And rather than just operating over that and ignoring that and powering through with our lives, we're going to stop and we're going to look at that. We're going to discuss it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to explore that. Right? Like, that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to handle it. And if that means we go to therapy, if like whatever that means, then that's what that means. And at the end of the day, if we don't find a way for both of us to be 100% in, then we're going to let the person go. Because this is not about that. This is not about us controlling someone for our own safety or our own security. This is about love. And so I think when it comes to creating a conscious relationship, and I'm going to speak to any of the singles out there for a moment. For any of the singles who are listening to this, when it comes to creating a conscious relationship, it starts by having a conscious relationship with yourself. And what I mean by that is you have certain standards that you're not willing to compromise. As I shared earlier, the 15 times that we almost broke up in our first year together, that was about us clarifying our standards. That was about us identifying where the relationship was rubbing up against our standards and saying like, hey, I don't know if this is going to work. And it wasn't like, this doesn't work for me, you need to change. It wasn't like that. But it was like, we got to talk about something. We got to communicate. We've got to clarify. We've got to understand. We've got to set a boundary. We've got to set some expectations here and see if the other person can get on board with it, because the way I'm feeling right now is that if this keeps going like this might not work. But that's not something that either of us could have done if we hadn't been in a certain place with ourselves already. And I look at my past and my wife can look at her past, and we can both identify so many places where we abandon ourselves to be with someone. So many places where we did not hold to our standards, or where we didn't even have standards, right? So many places where we were willing to tolerate things that we never should have tolerated, where we were willing to accept things that we never should have accepted. And we were doing that because we didn't have a conscious relationship with ourselves. We were doing that because the idea of being loved by someone was more important to us than being loved by ourselves. And so all those things that we should not have accepted, but we did accepted, or that we did accept, were reflections of that, right? Those were the places in our life where our own lack of self-worth was being reflected back to us in the relationships that we had. And I remember for myself in the, when I look back to like my early 20s, when I first started having serious relationships, and I've had a handful of like relationships that lasted over a year. Like I've had quite a few, what I would say, relatively serious relationships. And when I look at how it started, in my early 20s, when I think about my first couple that I was in, they were really bad, right? Everything from just me being with women who were just straight up toxic and manipulative and destructive, to being with people who were nice, but they just were not lighting any kind of fire in my soul. They didn't inspire me to be better. They didn't call forth any kind of greatness in me. It was just total settling, total comfort. And then I look at some of the relationships that I had later on, like closer to the time where I met my wife. And I was actually in some really great relationships that I left. And so this was such a huge lesson for me when, I remember one relationship in particular. I was with this woman, and on paper, I thought she was everything I ever wanted. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was accomplished. She was just wonderful in so many ways. And to this day, I would never say a bad thing about her. But there were certain things in the relationship that didn't sit right with me. And I'll just give one small example is she didn't believe in my dream, right? She was kind of cynical. I was working on, at the time I was in this education program to become a personal development trainer. And I was hoping to get hired by this company, which I later did get hired by. And right up until the pandemic, I was traveling all over the US delivering these trainings for groups of people. It was some of the most fun work I've ever had. And this was my dream at the time, right? When I was with this woman. And she didn't believe in it, right? I remember one day I came home and I said to her, I just found out, when I get hired, like this is how much I'm going to be making per training. And I was really excited about it. And she said to me, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. And I said to her, I said, do you not believe in me? And she said, no, I believe in you. I just don't trust the company. Right. And so here I am investing everything into this dream that I have. And she didn't fully support me in it. And I'm not even saying that that's something that was wrong with her. I'm saying that that's something that was incompatible in our relationship. Right? Like that's something that just didn't sit right with me. It was like a non-negotiable for me. Like I need to be with someone who believes in me. And so I didn't break up with her that day, but, it was not long after that, I started to feel that this relationship wasn't the right relationship for me. And I ultimately ended up leaving this person. And that was a huge step for me. That was a huge step for me to be in a relationship which on paper looked like my ideal. It looked like everything I wanted, everything that I had hoped to find. I thought I had it. And I tried to make it work. I tried to stay and I tried to do all the things. But at the end of the day, there was something in my soul that said, I cannot stay here. And at the end of the day, I had to trust that. And that was part of me creating a conscious relationship with myself. And that had to happen before I met my wife. You see, if I had met my wife, and to be honest, I probably met many people like my wife prior to meeting her. But I was not in a place where I could hold that quality of relationship. And therefore, it didn't stick. You see, the only relationships that I could hold were the relationships that matched my sense of self. And as my sense of self elevated, those relationships fell out of my life until I met someone who was in the same place I was. And there was that synchronistic connection. There was that meant to be-ness about it. And we didn't know that at the time, right? Like I said, we almost broke up a whole bunch of times. Like we didn't know that it was meant to be. We had to figure that out. We had to discover that together. But I had to elevate my relationship with myself before that connection could happen. And then through the work we did together in those first couple of years, from the time we met until the time I proposed to her, that was us clarifying our commitment in this relationship. You see, in the Inspired Love program, I teach the natural timeline of a conscious relationship. And what I often say is, don't make any serious commitments for the first year. You can make a commitment to be exclusive with the person. You can be their boyfriend or their girlfriend, right? You can make commitments to spend time with them. You can make commitments to get to know them. You can make yourself available for them. You can invest a lot of energy in the relationship, but don't start making commitments like you're going to get married or move in together or things like that until after you've been together a year. And the reason I teach that is because you can't know somebody really until you go through some stuff with them. So many people get married when they're in that kind of honeymoon phase. And I shouldn't say so many people. I think it's less common than it used to be. But a lot of people get married in that honeymoon phase and, the first couple of months of being together. And they're like, I've never felt like this and I'm so in love with you. And they get married without ever going through some challenges with the person. And you can't know someone until you go through some challenges with them. You see, when we rush into a relationship like that, when we rush into a relationship that we're really not ready for, that's coming from a place of wounding. It's coming from a place of fear and desperation and worrying that I'm not going to find it, or I'm going to be left out. Like, if that relationship is meant for you, if that's the one, you cannot lose them. If that is the divine selection for you, you cannot lose them. So there is no need to rush it. And if you rush it, you're rushing it because you're afraid that if you don't, you're going to lose it. You're rushing it from an ego-driven place, saying that I have to lock this down now because I don't trust that it's meant for me. And it's in doing that real work together where you confront those difficult places. I've often talked about how conscious relationships confront these make or break points. These make or break points where it's like, we're either going to get through this or we're going to go our separate ways. And my wife and I have stood at the precipice of those make or break points on many occasions. But that's the reason our relationship is as strong as it is because we have been willing to go to those points. Whereas if we hadn't been willing to go to those points, we honestly wouldn't know how strong our relationship is. We might hope it was strong. We might pray it was strong, but we wouldn't really know. A lot of couples get on really well for the first period of time, however long it might be while they're together. They think they're in love. They think it's their person. They think it's all wonderful. They never confront any real challenges together. And then something happens in their life, some kind of really challenging thing that happens in their life. And the relationship is not built to sustain it. And so when potentially they needed each other most, when potentially they could have been the greatest support for each other, they end up losing the relationship on top of whatever other challenging thing is happening because their relationship wasn't strong enough to sustain that. Because they avoided the work. They avoided going to those difficult places until something pushed them there. And then they found out they couldn't handle it. I had something come up with one of the ladies in my Inspired Love group last week. We did our first session for the European time zone, which is also another exciting update that I wanted to share, is that we just recently released a time zone for Europe. So it's really cool to now be able to accommodate people on different sides of the world. And we had our first European session last week, and there was a lady in there who brought up something really awesome, and I just wanted to share a little bit about it. She was talking about how she went on a trip with some friends, and her boyfriend was, he was just, feeling abandoned, feeling wounded, feeling like some of his needs weren't being met, feeling like the communication that he expected while she was gone wasn't there, and he was feeling a little vulnerable about it. And he wasn't being a jerk or anything, but he was just communicating that, I feel disconnected. I'd like to, talk to you a little more or have a little more insight into what's going on. And she was triggered by this. And she was triggered because her wounds were being activated, right? Her wounds were being activated, and that she feels like nothing I do is ever enough. She feels like I'm doing something wrong. I'm just trying to have a good time with my friends, and you're making me feel like I'm doing something wrong. And so, what's happening is her distance was triggering his abandonment wounds, and his abandonment wounds were triggering her I'm not good enough or I don't do enough wounds. And this is exactly what happens in all relationships. Our wounds trigger each other's wounds. This has happened with me and my wife so many times, still does sometimes, right? Where our wounds trigger each other's wounds. And when we're unconscious, we assume that something bad is happening. We assume that something has gone wrong. We assume that it should not be this way, right? From an unconscious place, that's how we interpret these types of things. But when we're conscious, we understand that, oh, you know what? We're all vulnerable human beings. We've all been wounded at some time. We've all been let down. We've all been disappointed. We've all been heartbroken. We've all possibly been cheated on or forgotten about or left behind or whatever, right? We've all been through these kinds of things. And it's normal when we open our heart to someone. It's normal when we make ourselves vulnerable to another person that those wounds are going to be activated. That is a very normal thing. In fact, it will always happen in every relationship. And when we're conscious, we have an awareness about that. And so instead of getting angry, why are you giving me a hard time while I'm on my trip? Or why aren't you being more connected with me? Why are you ignoring me while you're gone, right? When we're conscious, we just understand where our partner's coming from. And we say, I'm sorry, honey, I wasn't trying to make you feel abandoned or ignored. I've just been busy. I've just had things going on. Do you want to make some time to talk tonight? Right? That's all. And then when you talk, there can be a sharing that happens where, this is what I talked about with her, where, she has the opportunity to practice compassion for what he's going through. And he has the opportunity to be responsible for his own wounding and not blame her for it because it's not her fault. She didn't do anything wrong. So he can take responsibility for his wounding and he can say, hey, this is what's coming up for me and it's not your fault. But being that we're in a loving, supportive relationship, I just wanted to share that this is what's coming up for me right now. And she can reciprocate that and she can say, I understand. And her willingness to hold that compassionate space for him gives him the opportunity to heal. Whereas maybe in past relationships or when he was a child or wherever that wound came from in his life, there wasn't a safe place to be heard, to be understood, to be held in that experience. Well, now he has that. And she can then share, when you shared your wound with me, this is what came up for me. I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I felt like I was doing something wrong. I felt like I was being blamed for something. And she has the opportunity to be responsible for her experience and say, that's not your fault, right? That's just how this experience activated me. And he has the opportunity to hold her compassionately in that. And that gives her the opportunity to heal her wounds, where she goes through life feeling like nothing I do is ever enough, and I'm always doing something wrong, and I'm always getting in trouble or whatever, right? And maybe in her life, in her past, she didn't have someone who could hold her in that experience, who could offer her compassionate awareness in that experience. And now she does. And so in them both taking responsibility for their experience and offering compassion to their partner for the experience their partner is having, there's a safe space where both people can heal. And that's what conscious love is all about. You see, it's not about just getting what we want from the person. It's not about just the person making us happy or fulfilling all our needs. But it's about this kind of healing that we can do together. It's about having your partner serve as a mirror for your own wounds, as well as serving as a loving space to hold you in those wounds when they come up. And when that happens, and when the more and the better that you learn to come together around that, the more responsible you can be for your own reactions, the more clear you can communicate them with your partner, the more you each develop a capacity to have compassion for your partner's experience without judgment, the more quickly you can heal and the more quickly you can get back to all that good, beautiful, yummy stuff that we want to have in our relationships. But I think so many of us just want to have the good, yummy stuff. without really acknowledging the work it takes to get there. And that is something that I think is sad, because until we truly acknowledge that, until we truly acknowledge this process and surrender to it, right? Like really give ourselves over to it. Like we stop resisting, we stop wishing that it wasn't so hard. We stop saying, why can't I just meet my person already, right? Instead, we start to accept the people that are showing up as the reflection of where we are operating now, and we start using those people as opportunities for growth. And maybe right now where you are, your opportunity for growth is to create a boundary with this person. Maybe your opportunity for growth is to walk away from a relationship that doesn't serve you. Maybe your opportunity for growth is to confront one of those make or break points with the person you're with and trust that if they're the right person for you, you can't lose them. And maybe your growth right now is to let that person go, and maybe it's to approach that make or break point and come back stronger than ever. But if we can really surrender to the process and stop trying to control it and manipulate it into what we want it to be, and we can trust that if we operate from love, love is that desire to not only get what I want, but to have both of our highest fulfillment at heart of the situation. And trust that if I start to operate from love in every situation, love will be returned to me. Either in the person I want or I'm with right now, or in their equivalent. But I don't need to control that. I don't need to manipulate that. I need to focus on my capacity to love more fully. And that's the essence of a conscious relationship. And I do just want to say that if you want to join us in the Inspired Love program, as I shared earlier, this is an unfolding conversation around conscious love. And it doesn't matter where you are, if you're in a relationship, if you're single, if you want to have a conscious relationship, if you want to create and sustain a conscious relationship, if you want your current relationship to be more conscious, if you want your next partner, if you want to be able to engage with whoever comes into your life next in this conscious way, and you want to learn the tools and the skills to do that, and you want to have a community of support around you who can hold you as you figure this out, right? And you want to have my guidance and sometimes the guidance of my wife as we work together in this. And you want to have our guidance and our support as we show you what we've learned, right? And we can help you navigate these incredibly complex situations that, I'll be honest, and you don't need me to tell you this, they're incredibly confusing when you're in it. Sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes we need that guidance. I have a coach and a therapist that I talk to on a regular basis. And that's because I need guidance, right? If I want to give guidance to others, sometimes I need it myself. And so there's no shame in recognizing that, hey, a community of support, some guidance from somebody who's been there, right? Like that's not going to hurt me. That's going to help me. Being in the vibrational frequency of people who are in this conversation is going to help me better understand what it's like to live in that frequency. Is going to help me more easily tap into that and more quickly and more readily be able to create this in my life for myself, whether you're in a relationship or not. And so that's what this program is about. It's an opportunity to join a community of people who are engaging in a conversation around conscious love. And for the men who are listening, the program is open to you now, and I would really love to invite some more men in, and we can really elevate this conversation so it's not just about the challenges that women are going through, but it's the challenges that we as people are going through. And we can learn and grow together in that. And we can do that conscious work together. And for the ladies who are listening, it's open to you as always, and we have an incredible group of ladies in there that are doing incredible work. And this is a beautiful place for growth and healing as an individual or as a relationship. And so I just want to say before we close out today that if you do want to join, now through July 31st, we are offering a $1,000 discount on the total tuition of the program. So if you're interested, you can book a call at the link the link below wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can book your call there and learn a little bit more about it. We are offering that $1,000 discount now through July 31st. The other thing I want to say, and I don't know if I've mentioned this, but this is a lifetime membership, right? So once you pay the cost of the program, you're in for life. And so you can be in it while you're looking for love. You can be in it as your relationship grows, as it develops. We don't kick anybody out. You can take a break and come back later when you feel like you need it. But what I really wanted this community to be was an ongoing place of conscious connection and growth. And so, that's why I made the lifetime membership available. And, you pay, you make your initial investment when you join, and then you're in. And then we can continue to grow together for as long as it's serving you. So I really would love to encourage some of you who listen to take advantage of that opportunity and before the 31st and save that extra $1,000 on the program. I don't often offer discounts like this, but a couple times a year I do. And, I want you to take advantage of it while it's on the table. So sending you so much love to all of you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening today. To my hardcore listeners who tune in every week, this one's for you, right? I didn't do my live stream, but I wanted to make sure to show up for you today. And so you have something when you expect it to be there. And I've really enjoyed doing this conversation on my anniversary. It's been nice to reflect on our journey and everything we've been through. So thank you for giving me the space to do that. And sending you so much love, wishing you the best in all of your relationships, and most importantly, your relationship with yourself, because everything starts from there. So lots of love, everybody. Many blessings. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you back here next week. Take care. Bye.